The legendary Spartacus, gladiator and leader of slaves against the Romans. Part 2 Inches. Leading the rebellion. Spartacus survived the gladiatorial lifestyle for an unknown period of time. Eventually, because of the severe training routines, the insult of his demotion from Roman soldier, and the unfairness of being forced to fend for his life in an animalistic fashion, Spartacus rallied the gladiators to escape the Capua school in 73 BCE. Using predominantly kitchen supplies to fight their way out, Spartacus and 70 fellow gladiators pillaged Capua on their way out of the city and fled to Mount Vesuvius to set up a defensive position. It is based on his strategic moves that scholars are relatively certain Spartacus had some sort of formal military training. His maneuver to Vesuvius, and the looting of the city Capua, reveals that Spartacus was not merely a slave with a whim. The irony lies in that he had been trained in these maneuvers by the very men he was fleeing, the Roman legions. Following military example, Spartacus and his fellow slaves created their own form of hierarchy, splitting their group into two factions, one under himself, and the other under a Celt called Crixus, or the one with the curly hair, his identifying feature in the classical texts. Though it is uncertain particularly why power was split, it was a clever idea to create a hierarchical regulation of power, ensuring every man in Spartacus and Crixus' armies were of equal status. Without such a regulation, the risk of an internal power struggle would have been threatening. The Romans themselves were unable to stop Spartacus and his men from escaping to Vesuvius. Luck was on the gladiators' sides during the rebellion, as many Roman legions were missing in action due to a revolt in Hispania and the Third Mithridatic War in Pontus, the final and longest of the three wars against Mithridates VI of Pontus in Armenia. However, we cannot overlook Spartacus' military skills, as, in the past, the previous two servile uprisings were dealt with as simple policing matters, not war crimes. Spartacus' attempt, however, necessitated the involvement of the remaining Roman legions. This after the failure of praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber in besieging and starving Spartacus' camp on Vesuvius in 72 BCE, and the subsequent massacre of Glaber's forces. In the same year, the Roman Senate sent two other men, Lucius Gellius Publicola and Annius Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus, to accost Spartacus and Crixus factions. While Crixus was defeated, Spartacus took no time in eliminating the Roman generals and their armies. Although Spartacus and his men were lucky that so many Roman forces were absent in the Republic at the time, Spartacus had made such waves throughout Italy that the Senate was forced to send whichever armies were left after him. Licinius Crassus, future one-third of the first triumvirate of Rome, volunteered his services.